The sitting is resumed. Senator Reverend Charles Morris.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, for allowing me to have the opportunity to take part in this debate. I want to give my contribution towards education. In fact, in particular, I want to make a case for education transformation. And let me assert from the very beginning that if this Barbados Labour Party government does not complete education transformation in this country, it will never, ever be achieved. And this country will be left behind, and our development will be retarded. Other countries not as advanced, I'm sure, will overtake us, and Barbados will be in a state, in the words of Norman Manley, going up the dumb escalator. In his book, sir, The Dignity of Difference, by Jonathan Sachs, in chapter 3, he refers to exorcising. In fact, the chapter is entitled Exorcising Plato's Ghosts. And we heard this last week, a quote from, that is assumed to have come from Plato. Plato himself, sir, believed in a hierarchical structure of society. Plato believed in elitism. Plato believed that there are persons in society who are unfit for leadership. Only those who understand justice and truth should govern. Plato's political ideas were very much against democracy. In fact, he talked about the philosopher king. He talked about rule. He talked about tyranny. In fact, Plato in his Republic and Statesman was very critical of democracy, believing it led to chaos and the rule of ignorant masses. But there's more to this, sir. Last week, we were some months into listening to a 10-hour speech in which a statement was made pretending to be quoting Plato that, what was it again, democracy? Show me a democracy and I will show you a tyrant. Those are not Plato's words, sir. They never came from Plato. Plato gave a different form of a different definition, but those words were not Plato's. Those words came from someone whom I believe was reading a book on the Statesman or the Republic, and a rat was gnawing at the pages, and therefore a rat, yeah, or mouse, or whatever it is, and therefore the pages then became incomplete. But those words were not Plato. In other words, let me tell you what Plato said, sir. Plato said that rulers should use a noble lie. Those are Plato's words. That rulers should use a noble lie. And I am assuming, sir, that if a person uses a noble lie, then that person must become an ignoble liar. And he was saying that we should, in other words, lie to the people. Lie to the people. So that you can easily fool those whom you are leading. In fact, Plato said, tyranny by its very nature arises from democracy. Use a noble lie. Use a noble lie. But I'm here to say, sir, that when we examine education over these years, education was used as a noble lie. And there are some things that need to be repeated. Our education system is still haunted by the ghosts of Plato. It is still haunted by elitism. You look at education system, sir. We talk about free education. That, sir, is a noble lie. And I want to say also that when you look at the development, say, of education, and even from the days of slavery, slaves, sir, were not educated. They were trained for the menial tasks. There was a belief that slaves could only do what was mechanical. And those whom we charge with educational brilliance in this land, Coleridge, Bishop Coleridge, who devised a system for the enslaved masses then to remain laborers on the plantation. That is what Coleridge spent his ministry doing, ensuring that the planter class had a labor force. In fact, one of Coleridge's beliefs, and I'm looking at a paper done by, let me tell you the title of it, The Role of the Church in Preparing Caribbean Slaves for Freedom. A fellow named Charles Morris did it.
What's the year, please, for the record? And just as you're quoting, you'll make it a document of the House.
No, I'm not quoting this, I'm just looking at it.
Oh, I see, okay.
I'm just looking at it. It was in December 2015.
Okay.
Yeah. But when we look and see what was happening, the attitudes of the elites, Plato's people, towards education. For the elites, education was seen as a development too high for blacks. Not my words, Coleridge's words. It was an instrument to tame the multitudes and repress social barbarism and preserve their own superior status. And one of the persons, sir, that we log today, apart from Coleridge, is another guy called Parry, Bishop Parry. You know what Parry said, sir? In fact, he was described in the Barbados Times in 1870 as notoriously hostile to the intellectual progress of the masses. That's how Parry was described. I'm going back into history, sir, to show you that Plato's ghost has ruled education. When we were told that education was free, beginning in 1960, when we were told that, or 62, I remember in 2012 celebrating 50 years of education, of free secondary education. Sir, that was a noble lie. Because when education was supposed to be free, I can repeat it, sir, because I heard the opposition constantly repeating certain statements. I'm going to repeat it. When education was made free, only those who could, in fact, those who could pay were the ones who were freed up immediately. And then we create a system of Plato's elitism, Plato's lied. Noble lied. What were the facts, sir? That there were 6 or so schools that students were trying to get into. And they had to take this ridiculous thing called a common entrance exam, or whatever exam it was. And at the same time that you had that exam, the poor people in this country, the children of the working class people, had to pay for these exams. Had to pay to get into schools. The same time, in fact, simultaneously, you had independent schools emerging. And there were 30 or 40 independent schools in Barbados. Most of them were, as I said before, most of them were owned by Mr. Barry's friends or his cabinet ministers. Yes, sir. I went to Federal, sir. Federal was owned by Mr. Joy Edwards. And he was the Minister of Housing. And all day you hear the saws going because he was building houses at the back. I'm not mixing my words, sir, I'm telling you. We had to pay. And when I went to Federal, sir, the school fees was $45. I heard somebody say that school fees was $8. $8 for Golden Pie. And they couldn't make it. But imagine paying, I have to pay $45 from a grandmother whose weekly wage was $13.65. Oh, you see the difference. It was free. Federal, Modern, Lynch's, Washington, Industry, Metropolitan, Co-op, a whole Wakefield, a whole wave of schools, and all of them had put the children of poor parents going to them. But if that was not enough, sir, you had to pay the school fees. And something happened to me that I shall never forget. I don't ever forget it, sir. One Tuesday evening, I was given a letter to take home. And I gave the letter to my grandmother. And she gave it to my mother. We used to have to work. I like to tell my story, sir, because I'm not ashamed of who I am. I'm not ashamed of where I came from. And the morning, we used to walk from Black Bess to walk down there, leave home at 6:15 to catch a 7 o'clock bus. And the Wednesday morning, my mother said to me, don't put on those clothes to go to school. As of the day you finish school, go and look for work. I was in 3rd form. I was 14, going on 15. And sir, that thing hurt me. That my friends passed and going to school and I couldn't go. And I went into the bed and I cried and I cried and I cried. And I cried, sir, until my grandmother came into the room. And she took up the sheet and she began to wring it. And the tears from that sheet came out. That is what happened. And she said, get up and put on your clothes. Go to school. I went to say what my mother said, but I said, get up, put on your clothes and go to school. I know there was an 8 o'clock bus at Rahal, sir. I cannot remember to this day if I bathed or not. But I know that that bus was not leaving me. Not this time. And from then on, I understood that I wanted to learn. And I read everything. I read books. I'm sure Senator Blackman can tell you about my library. So if I may tell you this, once I I like to tell the truth, sir. You know, once upon a time I used to like a girl, and her mother told me, she said to her, before you go look for a man that can give you something, you go look for a madman that every book you see take up every. That's what she said. That's my story, sir. I'm not ashamed of it. Plato's ghost existed with the University of the West Indies because people believe that tertiary education was started by Mr. Barrow. And that is not true. That decision was made in 1938. Brandy Adams, Norman Manley, and Eric Williams, they all made the decision that there was going to be a University College of the West Indies, and that college would be free for the students of the children of working class parents. It meant, therefore, that whenever Barbados got a college, it would have been free. So we hear about all of this free education. Plato's ghost was in education when in, I think it was 1978, a whole set of 14-year-olds were dismissed from school under the Democratic Labour Party government. I don't hear anybody talking about that. They were dismissed, and a whole set of students were left with nothing to do. And it took a Barbados, no, it was 70, maybe 75, 76. And it took a Barbados Labour Party government that when, as soon as they won the election in 1976, I think it was September, they ushered them back to school. Plato's ghost, sir, remain in education with university students who immediately, in as one swoop, were told they had to pay. And this affected, sir, a number of students throughout Barbados. Can you imagine people going to university and they ended? And that came at a time when Plato's ghost was further enhanced in the society. It came at a time when the Ministry of Education immediately, in one swoop, said that principals must have a master's degree. Even if you had a master's degree in carpentry, you could become a principal. And that disqualified a number of good teachers from becoming principals. One swoop, Plato's ghost needs exorcising. And then some of those teachers who wanted to become principal could not even go to university to do the masters because they had some of them had children at university. Some of them had children at university, and then it would be either the children or the parents. Some of them decided that they were going to take on, they would prefer their children to have an education. Many persons, some of them dropped out and could not go back to schools. Plato's ghost is still in education because we are reaching a stage where there is supposed to be education reform. And I see a lot of things in the papers, but there are some things that need to be done as well. Teachers have to be in this system to be brought in. Parents have to be brought in. And the ministry as well has to be brought in. Let me tell you, sir, there's going to be pushback. You know what I've noticed? That every time there is an attempt to change something, there are some armchair scholars without any facts, without any information, who want to resist that change. Teachers are going to be the ones to push, to work this system. But teachers cannot work a system when they are frustrated. But teachers themselves, and sir, I am speaking very frankly, teachers themselves must accept responsibilities for their classrooms, for the students under their charge. Why? Because many of our teachers now, sorry, not many, some of our teachers are focused on lessons, and our children do not even have time to breathe. I know of situations where some teachers, even though they were senior teachers, never lifted a finger to assist with the administration of the school. But they come at night at 9:15 and leave at 3 o'clock. They're not doing anything in the schools. And some of them are senior teachers. And I speak from experience, sir. Not my own experience, because you know everybody used to hear me when they teach in the school. Facts. Facts. This is not a noble life. This is what they do. Some of our young teachers come into the system, and the first thing they want, after 1 year, they want their year ahead. After 2 years, they want to be principal, a deputy principal. That's what they're coming to do. And I'm saying that the time has come for them to take charge of our children. Some teachers, sir, and I'm afraid I have to say it, are sexually involved with some of our students. That cannot work any longer in our system. But that's teachers. But teachers are frustrated in this system too. I realize that there are some persons who do the accounts in schools called, not guidance counselors, secretary treasurers. Secretary treasurers are some are frustrating teachers. They're frustrating them. We have several teachers in this system who are in positions, and then it takes months and years for these teachers to be paid. I left Combermere School, and I'm going to be very frank about all of this. I left Combermere School in 2018, and the young lady that acted for me was not paid until August last year. 5 years acting as head of department and was not paid. We have some Christians in the schools. I say Christians doing the devil's work by referring to the schools. There are some persons in the schools who are doing the devil's work and are retarding the development or the ideas of the Ministry of Education right now. I ain't finished yet, sir. We have persons who are retiring, and the secretary treasurers in the school would not send the people's information to the treasury. I am one who suffered from that. And you should ask, why is it that they say Michael School? Ask, why is it? I'm not mixing my words today, sir. That the St. Michael School is in confusion. The Secretary Treasurer, sir, should understand that they are employed by the boards. And the boards need to be the boards. But, and you see, sir, when a system was warped, it continued, because I remember, sir, that in 2018, I think it was around February or so, when you talk about, A whole set of new principals were appointed just like that. And some of them did not have the ability to lead. This is our system. Boards, they employ the Secretary Treasurer, and they look. Imagine me, sir. I came back here, applied for my benefits, and I was told that I retired already. Now, how on God's earth, sir, after 3, 6, 7 times going about your benefits, then you are told that you're retired? I said, well, how can I be retired when I did not sign anything? And I can tell you the result of that. After weeks and weeks and weeks, I was told to go to the ministry. And thank God for a lady in there. She said, but Reverend Morris, the wrong form is here. This is not what you should be signing. And that was what was given to me at Combermere School. These things are wrong. Wrong. We are in a system where people want to do what they feel like. And when they are called, when they're called out, they want to bring the whole world against them. We need persons in the teaching profession, in the teachers, among the teachers who are committed. And sometimes, sir, sometimes teaching, to me, it may be a profession, but it's also a vocation. It is also a vocation. We have to transform this society. Why? Because we have a common entrance exam that is not working. Sir, I am willing to bet you that come, the exam is in May, come June or July, what will happen? You're going to see that the papers are going to be littered with all these students that get 98 and 100. The papers are going to be littered with them. But what about the person who got 35? And you can imagine Senator Waters and myself. No, I ain't got 35. I ain't got 35. But imagine, not that I have a child, sir, at this particular age taking the common entrance exam. So don't misunderstand me. I said, just imagine. Senator Waters and I walk in the streets the day the results come out, and he is going to say to me, oh, Reverend Morris, congratulations. Why? Because my son or daughter passed for Harrison's College. And I will say, congratulations. Harrison College. I know. I would say congratulations to him too, because his son or daughter passed for Queen's College. But what about those who are left behind? What about those who are left behind? We are still living in a system that reflects Plato's noble lie. Almost $500 million spent on education. Almost $100 million on University of the West Indies. Almost $200 million for secondary schools. We need to do better than this. The time has come for this common entrance exam to go. Because you are saying to people that you need not. In fact, you're saying to people, you're reflecting Plato's lie. Plato's noble lie. That some are to be rulers and the others are to be serfs. And that's what this common entrance exam does. But we must adopt education transformation. It is the only way forward for Barbados right now. The only way forward. At the same time, sir, we had a situation where a few years ago, in one swoop, long leave that the teachers used to get, paid leave that they used to get, was removed. And it was not removed by any Barbados Labour Party Minister of Education. All those things that I told you, sir, were done by the Democratic Labour Party, you know. All of them. One swoop, you remove long leave. Now, let me tell you something about long leave. What people used to call leave passage. This was done or put in place when those English were teachers in Barbados. Some of them used to live at the garrison. Another vestige of colonialism that people trying to protect in here, like how they want to protect whole town. The vestige of colonialism. And a lot of these teachers used to live up there until it was taken over by the CHC. Sir, but during the summer, they all used to go back home. And every 5 years, they used to get what they call leave passage. They used to get a term's leave, and then they would go back home for that term. It was paid, the passage was paid, and they would go back home. And that persisted for some time until part of the last, what do we call them again? The last decade, or the 10 glorious years, depending on how you look at it. Because it could be 10 years of glorious uncertainties too. But the point is that during that period, teachers lost their leave. Sir, would you believe it was challenged in the courts? It was challenged in the courts. And what happened? The court ruled, if I may interpret it, the court ruled that, in fact, the court did not reinstate the leave. The court did not reinstate the leave. The court, from my interpretation, made a decision that the ministry really went about it the wrong way. That the ministry should have consulted the unions and all of that. But the ministry did not. The courts did not say that it should be reinstated. All of a sudden, one of the teachers' unions, not the BSTU, we don't operate like that, sir. One of the teachers' union, the Barbados Union of Teachers, I read in the papers that they are threatening to go on strike if their study leave is not returned. Right? So what is happening here, that when it...
Sorry, just to be clear, earlier you mentioned about the traditional terms leave, long leave. Just now you said study leave. Are you talking about this?
Sorry, not study leave, sir. That was my mistake.
Okay, just one.
I'm human, you know. I may look like a Greek god, but certainly I'm a human. I'm a human. I'm talking about term leave, sir. And all of a sudden, the Barbados Union of Teachers want to go on strike. They want to go on strike. When it was, now listen to this, sir, unions normally protest. But when it was a time to protest, the union decided they're going court. That's what they did. They're going court. And now, they want to strike. I want to say, sir, and you can prove this. This is no ignoble or noble lie. It's the truth. I remember once attending a meeting joint meeting. And persons at that meeting were caught by surprise. When one unionist and on the executive got up and said, I would like to say the things that Reverend Morris says, but I am afraid. I'm afraid. No, you want to go on strike. And it seems as though a kind of militancy is developing among our unions too. Because last week I read a situation where C2 Sab only found 2 positive notes about the budget. 2! And 40 against. One of these, sir, is C2 Sab. And I saw in a picture the president of C2 Sab sitting beside the same person, the general secretary. And I would like the president of C2 Sab to come out and say if he agrees with the general secretary. He should come out and say if he agrees or not. Because if he agrees, I will give him 150,000 reasons why he should not agree. And then I will give him 150,000 reasons why he should say, Mr. General Secretary, you are wrong. I will not say any more about that. But this is the kind of thing that is going on in our country right now. I remember some time ago, sir, about this militancy, because we are believing Plato's noble lie. And therefore, Plato's ghost must be exorcised. I remember going to a meeting of a union, C2 Sab again once. And we complained about how sad things were for Barbadians. And we were told things are very good, and that was during the last or lost decade, whatever it is, the lost decade. We were told things in Barbados are very good during the lost decade. Things were very good. Why they were good? Because look and see how many Barbadians are driving SUVs. That's what was told to us. Sir, if I had to tell you what was the response to that, I would be using some unparliamentary language. Unbiblical too. This is the kind of atmosphere in which we find ourselves today. And everything that this government does is given a pushback. And yet some of them cannot come up with solutions or even an idea, furthermore, a better idea. Sir, I believe that we need to look at education transformation. And I want to say, sir, that the Barbadian society has to ask itself whether our present education system is working for the majority of the country at this point in time, as reflected in our day-to-day experiences and interactions. Look at the attitudes of people to one another, the levels of disenchantment and disillusionment of our youth, the too evident anger, the use of subcultures that have now become mainstream in our society, the indifference to an acceptance of what was previously deemed, or unacceptance of what was previously deemed as negative and unacceptable in our society. Look at the decay in moral standards. The number of students leaving school after 6 years with no academic or any kind of certification. Why would we want to perpetuate that? Why would we want to keep Plato's ghost in our society? The question we must ask ourselves is why and how what we are doing in our schools will contribute towards the rise in violence in our society, the gun culture. When we tell people that at 11 years they're failures, when we tell our students, sir, that you are not good enough, but yet we parade the high flyers, what are we saying to our society? That the ghost of Plato must continue to haunt it. Sir, don't you realize that we have this noble lie of telling people that all the schools are equal? That's a noble lie, sir. In fact, I ain't even sure if it's noble anymore. But by saying that, we perpetuate Plato's ghost. Why do I say this, sir? That you have students who go to St. George Secondary School and St. Lucie and all of these other schools with sometimes between 0 and 10%, 0 and 30% or whatever it is. And you have those going to Harrison College and Queen's College and St. Michael and Combermere, and that is somewhere between 70 and 90 or 70 and 100. But when you put those other persons and those low achievers, I call them, in schools, they have to complete the same syllabi at the same time and take the same exam as the others. That cannot work, sir. That is what is causing the frustration in this place. And I believe that that is why people are so disenchanted. And some of our young people are so disenchanted. That common entrance exam, a noble lie, that it's free, that education is free. What are you saying? Sir, if you look at me, that exam told me, sir, I want to say though, that the only person that believes that I failed that exam are the persons who sent the results. Those are the only person who believes I failed that exam. But if you look at it, you know what it's saying to me? You're nobody. You are not from Plato's elite. You are not from Plato's rulers. You are nothing. You cannot be a priest. You cannot be a teacher. You cannot be a deputy high commissioner. You cannot be even a senator. That is what the common entrance exam is perpetuating. But I have some things to say. Is what we're doing in the primary school system, in the school system. Can our approach to education, as it is now, cause us to attain high levels of economic development? Can what we are having in the schools prepare us for the 21st century? Can we continue at this pace of not wanting to radically transform our education system? It is time that we need to transform it, sir. And what are some of these things that the government can do? First of all, we can look at the local context. At the local context, sir, we must identify the deficits and objective needs in the system and make provisions to address them. That's the first thing. Look and see what is happening in our schools. Look and see what is needed. Look and see the things that we can do without. And look and see the things that are retarding development in this country. And make provisions to address them. Secondly, sir, we must have competency-based learning. This may sound foreign to the opposition, sir. This may sound foreign to the Democratic Labour Party. Because I heard a 10-hour speech and then another 2-hour speech, 12 hours and I didn't hear anything, so. And that is why, sir, I finished eating waffles. I finished eating waffles because I'm going to become a waffler. But that's all here for the past, for last week and this week. Waffles, I ain't eating them at all. Because I may find myself meandering and things that don't matter. As happened last week, and certainly yesterday. Sir, we must have competency-based learning, and it must be pitched to the different levels and intelligences of our students, meeting the children where they are so that they can best develop their strongest skill sets, build self-esteem, have the tools to make a living, and have a sense of belonging in our society. That is what we need. We must have curriculum assessment and reform at all levels, sir. And this is going to be vital to suit not only present but future needs. Ideally, develop in students the propensity for lifelong learning. Jonathan Sachs, I think it's chapter 6, says that education is no longer a school thing. Education is a lifelong entity right now. But we must also, sir, have different methods of assessment and certification of students. I remember some time ago that there was an attempt to introduce school leaving, again, that receive opposition. But we must have different methods of assessment and certification of students so that their testing and general assessment is not done in one way to achieve one set of outcomes or certification. That's what we are doing. All we are doing, sir, is one teaching one way. Look, I don't even know how many of us teachers spend time with effective domain. How many of us teach morals from any lesson that we have, that we are administering? Thirdly, sir, yes, I just want the effective domain. Because effective domain allows you to build character, build skills, build behaviors and attitudes in keeping with the morals, mores, and standards of our society. And an emphasis on teaching effective communication skills, collaboration, conflict management, respect for self, and respect for others, along with that one word, empathy. The problem with our society, sir, is that we don't like to talk about empathy. We talk about pity. That's what we talk about. Because we like to say, Kadir, I'm sorry that you haven't passed the exam. Kadir, big pity, I have pity on you. But you know what about pity, sir? Pity is all words. All it says, I'm sorry. Kadir, I want to do better. But they do not lift their finger to help you. This is where that empathetic process comes in. I understand where you are. I feel for you, but I will do something about it. And these are the things that we need in our children. The use of technology. Technology will play an integral part of the learning process if we are to adequately prepare our students and society to be productive, to be efficient, to be relevant in achieving not just economic growth. You see, not just economic growth, but qualitative development. That's what we need. Qualitative development. And we can look, we don't have to just do it out of the woods. We don't have to go about it blindly or groping about, sir. Not necessarily. We don't have to reinvent the wheel for education transformation. We can work effectively by looking at the more successful systems. But you know what the problem is with these with these things? I remember there was an issue with the middle schools. Talk about middle schools. And from the time you hear, no, I'm not saying I'm for it or against it. But from the time you heard about middle schools, there was opposition. There was opposition. And some of these persons that talk about middle schools don't even know what middle schools are. And I asked the question, because some of them said it failed in other places. But because it failed in other places, does it mean that it will fail here? It doesn't mean that, sir. So what we need to do sometimes is to analyze the different examples, analyze best practices, so that we can effectively borrow from and adapt to specifically suit our needs. We can look at places like Japan. We can look at places like Finland. But we must be prepared to have the discipline that these people have. I heard people tell me, in fact, they would tell me about look at Singapore. Singapore is just as big as us and have 1 million people. But are we prepared to do the things that were done in Singapore? For example, chewing gum, that was banned. How many of us would want that? You know what we were here? That somebody is a dictator. That's what we will hear. We also need, seventhly, sir, sensitization programs. There's a pressing need for a strategic, effective, ongoing public sensitization program so that the wider society is aware of the plans at every stage and the reasoning and justification for the different elements of the process. And it must be done in a way that is readily understood by all to secure the public buy-in and assistance. That's the other thing we need in educational transformation. We must have it. It is a must. There must be, eighthly, strategic reorganization. We must have reorganization, restructuring, especially at the level of the Ministry of Education. That too must be restructured. I believe that gone are the days now, or I can say this, when the ministry and teachers were at loggerhead. Because in my view, the minister, and this speaking from experience here, the minister, the two deputies, education officer and the deputy are well qualified. You couldn't want a better group. So we have to work with them, and the ministry too has to reorganize itself. Sir, I will not be deterred by walking wafflers. Strategic reorganization, sir. Yes, the Ministry of Education may close, some schools may close every week, but it will pay some people to shut their mouths all the time. We need involvement in other sections of government. And this is what is important to me. Strategic education transformation. And let me say this, sir. You know that the only time you see the level at which we are talking about educational transformation. Good. So what we need, sir, is successful education transformation. It will require the strategic involvement of other government agencies as well, like the Ministry of Transportation, or Transport, sorry, that they can ensure the safe and timely arrival both at home and at school of the students. A dedicated bus system that will remove the students as far as possible from the negative influence of the minibus culture. If we can have an effective transportation system, sir, public transportation, government transportation, that will assist in removing some of that minibus culture that still would not discipline themselves. But what is more, the Ministry of Health. The Ministry of Health must be involved. To continue, because they've started it, to continue to encourage our students to eat healthily. Healthy. Listen, sir. You realize that your tax was put on the salty foods. And people complaining. I want to tell you something, sir. There was a young girl. She was forced. The parents used to tell the parents, do not bring the fast food. Do not give the girl the fast food. And they continue to do it. Because she was supposed to pass to Queen's College. She died. Childhood obesity. And what we are doing, sir, is what all the big advertisements of the fast foods, the fried foods, the this and the next and the third. And then when they get sick and they have to wait in the area at the hospital, they complain. And persons making the profits, organizations making the big profits, and the government of Barbados paying the bill. So we also must have a physical resource plan. We must have, sir, and say you said I have 5 minutes? I have 5 minutes?
That was 2 minutes ago.
Oh, 2 minutes ago. Yes. It will require, sir, massive spending on providing the most effective and efficient physical and human resources with purpose-built or retrofitted facilities and training and retraining of all persons in the school plan. It means that children must be trained and retrained, and teachers in particular must be retrained. Sir, as I move on, I believe that testing of our children should return. Our children used to be tested for sight, for hearing, for speech, for everything. And in one swoop, it was stopped by the Minister of Education in the last decade. We have started good. I'm glad for that, sir. That's why I tell you that for education transformation to take place, this Barbados Labour Party government must do it. And finally, sir, I believe that we should enhance the adult education program throughout this country. It needs to be in the communities, fully financed by government. And I'll tell you why. Because, you know, we talk about free education, but when it came to the exams, the external exams, oh yes, it was the people of the working class, the children of the working class people, that not only had to pay school fees, but had to pay for the exams, to do the exams. This came in recently, a few years ago, when children were not turning up for exams. People entered for 9 subjects and not turning up for the exams. So we need to transform this system. We need to exorcise Plato's ghost, Plato's elitism, Plato's depression, Plato's, whatever it is about Plato, his ghost needs to be exorcised from education so that Barbadians can move forward. And at some stage, they can say, up and on. I thank you, sir.
Thank you, Senator Reverend Charles Forrest. Senator the Honourable Chad Blackman.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Let me first also start by welcoming my colleague, Senator Reid, to the chamber. This is the first time I'm speaking since he's arrived. I know him for a long time. He was my senior at Foundation School, and we've done a number of things throughout the years thereafter. But let me also get straight to the meat of the matter. I rise to lend my unwavering support to this year's estimates, 2025-2026, because it comes in the advent of Barbados transforming itself into not just a modern democracy, an economy and society, but a country that is a republic and constantly unshackling the remnants of our colonial history. And I want to start there for a number of reasons, and simply saying to the country that for a long time we've had a path, different administrations of course, towards greater in education, but this new ministry, newly configured, is on a simple path, Mr. President. Notwithstanding the myriad of opportunities, and equally there are some challenges, but the ministry is committed to ensuring that Barbados can have the #1 educational system anywhere in the world. And I start there, bearing in mind that in order for us to transform a nation, education has to be at the core of what we do. And I find this debate quite timely for another reason. This year, of course, makes 400 years since the landing of the British here in Barbados. And for us to be debating this year's estimates within the context of that reality and charting a new path for what education must look like for not generations within the next even 10 years, Mr. President, but this transformation process. And I choose that word and emphasis even more in particular. This is not about only a transition, which has become a view of many, but the transformation, the reformation of our entire educational system now has to bear a reality that reflects the future aspirations of generations that we may never even know. But we are now laying the foundation for them to benefit and to thrive so that all who pass through our educational system in Barbados can be world-class, can be dominant, can be confident, and can look ahead and be proud having passed through this system. The truth of it is, Mr. President, and I'm sure many colleagues in here and those listening will share this view, or at least some of us, and I'll come to that. Part of our educational system, sadly, has, throughout the years, throughout the decades, particularly even in our post-colonial and post-independent reality, has come with deep levels of inequality in its system. And this government has determined that the future of Barbados can no longer have within its bosom an educational system that has within its tenets any level of inequality. And this is not just about education, it is how do we ensure that across the country, our entire system, whether it's in business, whether it's for the disabled community, access to quality health care, everything is being reformed and transformed to include everyone, to ensure also the highest quality that everyone can have once they come interface with our systems. And therefore, this education transformation comes at a time when we need to accelerate it and to ensure that we can put Barbados further on that footing of transformation and reform as we go forward. Now, the world that we live in, Mr. President, is one that constantly changes and will change. And therefore, the system that our children come through, from pre-primary straight to tertiary, must be one that allows for them to be able to not only compete, but to be able to ensure that their Barbadian dominance and fingerprint is out there in the world. And how do we intend to do that? Having, therefore, a look at the entire system from its pre-primary stage straight up to the tertiary stage in preparing our people, not just for the world of work, but for the world of doing business, both in Barbados, CARICOM, and beyond. And as a result of that, we firstly must ensure that when there's a transformation taking place, all are included. And I want to commend those who came before me for ensuring that there was comprehensive levels of dialogue and interface with the public, but certainly as the new minister in this ministry, I also want to commit to the public for continuing dialogue, because while transformation is not a destination, it is a journey. I also want the public in the country to understand that the transformation journey is not going to be simply a 2025 exercise, 2026, 27, 28. Every future administration and parliament ought to be in the exercise of transformation. Why? I've always said it, one of our successes and equally failures as a society within the last 60 years has been that whenever we've done very, very well in different areas, in different sectors, in different things, we oftentimes pat our back, thump our chest, take our foot off of the gas, whilst others around us in the region, around the world, look to us for inspiration. They take that inspiration, internalize it, and move past as we go forward in the world. Therefore, the transformation exercise of education has to be an ongoing reality for the country, so that as we continue to raise the standards of our delivery of education, the quality of education, widening the net of the education, we're also constantly looking how can we improve for everybody, whether it be for the students, who of course are the cornerstone, for the teachers, who are the foundation, and ultimately the overall architecture, which also include the ancillary staff, who play a key role in ensuring that the educational system that we have can be fit for purpose for 21st century realities. And therefore, a constant review of the educational system is going to be key. And therefore, the last word in the new name of the ministry which I lead, Mr. President, tells really the story: transformation. How do we ensure now that we can move to a new reality in preparing our young Barbadians? And what should the average Barbadian student look like, having passed through this educational system that we're looking to bring some significant levels of transformation? One, they should be confident. Our people, and I've seen it even before coming to the ministry, you would just go to anywhere in our country and you interface with our people, and it's not their fault, but the ecosystem has led to that. You talk to a person, sometimes they look you, Mr. President, in your chest as opposed to in your eye. We have to ensure that when children pass through our system, they have a high degree of confidence, not arrogance, but confidence, the ability to stand on your feet or where you are and to engage with your counterparts or colleagues anywhere in your home, your neighborhood, your school, your community group, anywhere in the world once you pass through. And therefore, one of the things I've always said, and Mr. President, I'm not sure if this happened in your time, but certainly when I was at school, there was this thing where if you spoke a lot, they tell you, stop talking, put your hands on your lips. But then, when you become the age of 14, 15, 16, and you go to be sat into school sports, and CBC or any media house comes to interview you, and the microphone comes before you, somehow society expects you to now become the greatest orator in the history of the world. It can't work. Why? Because the ecosystem at that early age, particularly at the pre-primary stage, both in schools, equally in the households as well, has not allowed for the nurturing. And oftentimes when you look at the young people in North America, Europe, Africa, Asia, at the same age, they're able to deliver. Even if they're not sure of what they're saying, the confidence is there, and therefore we must not go in that aspect. Equally, another key pillar of the Barbadian student has to be one of critical thinking. When presented with a series of facts or data before you, how can you analyze and bring those sets of facts to bear to allow for you to make the best decision, to analyze complex problems? And therefore, it will also come into what I will also talk about a bit later with respect to how we teach our children in our schools. Thirdly, and importantly, and I'm sure my colleague to my right, the Minister for Innovation, Science and Technology and Industry, will agree. Barbadians, through our school system, have to be exposed and encouraged to be innovative. Innovation must also be part of who we are as we transform our education system. Problem solving. How can you solve things that come before you even if you were not exposed to it before? And it also therefore ties into the critical thinking that I spoke on. I've gone on record as saying it before, and I'll say it again, Mr. President. Our education system has to prepare Barbadians and Barbadians for the future, and for the now, actually, in the context of foreign languages. Foreign languages must not only be within the domain of those in Europe or in Asia, but every young Barbadian must be exposed to, and not just exposed to it, to be able to grasp and be proficient and to speak, even if it's at a conversational level, whether it's in French, in Spanish, in German, Arabic, Chinese. And therefore, one of the things that I've already said to the team in the ministry is part of the curriculum review, and of course it takes resources to roll out over a phased approach, is to ensure that our young people from the pre-primary stage right up are exposed to a foreign language. Now, in Europe, you have different models where, for example, foreign language is not just taught as a class, but part of your curriculum, whether 10%, 40%, etc., is now taught in the foreign language. But that is an approach that we would have to look at and explore, but this is where the future of education and foreign language has to be for us. And I'm committed, Mr. President, for us to go in that direction. When we also talk about the Barbadian of the future through our education system, they have to be globally competitive. When you have a small business or large business, when you are applying for a job here in the Caribbean or in Barbados, around the world, if you want to be a footballer, you want to compete to get into a club in Europe or in Africa, how do you now have the tools through the exposure that the educational system has afforded you here in Barbados to go anywhere in the world and to have not just a chance, but a cutting edge above everybody else? We're small enough to do it, but it simply requires us to order our affairs in a way for us to do so. And then lastly, and by no means least, and of course this list is not exhaustive, but industrialization and industriousness has to be within the DNA and fabric of the Barbadian student of today and the future. Our motto speaks to it: pride and industry, Mr. President. And not only must we take pride in our education system, but we have to ensure that our people can now understand how to become industrious and to become an industrial nation. Oftentimes we think that to be an industrial nation, you have to have a large landmass. Early in today's debate, the senator to my right, Minister Reid, rightly outlined that we are a large ocean state, larger than many of the current economies in terms of geographic size, who continue to have economic prowess. Therefore, we have to reacquaint the mind of our people to see industry and business and creating new things, new devices, backed by research and development. And you put those ideas to market, and it mustn't only be when you leave school. The re-engineering of the curriculum, therefore, has to work towards getting us there at an early stage. And the ministry, therefore, is committed to that. And therefore, as I said, my goal, and I've said to my team, is that Barbados must now work towards being the #1 education system anywhere in the world. And it's in our DNA. And whether you go from the history of Rantley Adams, to Tom Adams, to Bree St. John, to Owen Arthur, to Mia Motley, our current Prime Minister, all of those persons and leaders I would have spoken about, Mr. President, outline a clear vision for the people to follow and to aspire to. They give you a clear roadmap. This is where we will go, and this is the reason why, and here is the reason why we must do so and how we will get it done. And therefore, not to my surprise, I was on a program, Brass Tacks, a couple weeks ago, on a Sunday, speaking on the same education reform. And you have who I'm told the last caller that day on the program was a former foreign minister of this country. I will repeat, I'm told that the last caller when I was on the program was the former foreign minister in a Democratic Labour Party administration, who arguably will go down in the history of Caribbean politics as the worst foreign minister in the Caribbean, Mr. President. Who started to throw questions and aspirations on the process of which we are now looking to undertake. And why was I shocked? Because said person, Mr. President, has now resolved herself to be the bag carrier of the leader of the opposition and wants to come and lecture this government on education transformation. Where was she, Mr. President, when the aspirations of young Barbadians who were enrolled, not only wanted to be enrolled, but those who were enrolled in the University of the West Indies, where she was a teacher and a lecturer? And I'm also told that she was fired. These are facts. And therefore, had the audacity to come on a national program and want to lecture the Barbados Labour Party on education. She sat as part of an administration, and I hope Senator Walters is going to listen and take back the message also, because she sat as part of an administration, Mr. President, who did the unthinkable in making Barbadians pay at the University of the West Indies. And Maxine McLean, I'm calling on you to apologize to the people of this country.
You don't have clearance to call the name. No need to call the name, please.
Okay, Mr. President, I wouldn't call the foreign minister of the Democratic Party's name.
Advisor of the chief advisor, leader of the opposition.
There you go. And as I said, Mr. President, the one who has resolved herself to be the bag carrier of the opposition leader. But I will go on, because this presentation is not about her. There's another time coming where she will be dealt with accordingly. We also have a situation, and I'm sure, Mr. President, that those who, and it's very interesting, that those who parade in the name of El Barrow and his philosophies, were he to come back to the world right now, he would say to all of them, "Depart from me, I know you not." But they like to invoke his name and his spirit. It can't work. you bear no resemblance to his views, philosophies, or ethos. So go and come again. But Mr. President, I move on. We have a situation where Barbados is not just a world leader in terms of ideology. People look to Barbados for leadership. People look to Barbados. Now, listen, man. Mr. President, I am not going to preach in here, but I feel like I can preach this afternoon. Barbados is a leader in everything we do. I had a distinct honor when I served as ambassador in Geneva, under whose leadership was Senator Walker, at the time as foreign minister. When I first went there, within the first week, and this is a lesson for all of those in governance today. In my first week of going there, Mr. President, we are a new administration, so persons, of course, weren't accustomed to, not just me as the individual, but they weren't used to Barbados coming on the scene and making any meaningful impact. Because for 10 years, Barbados was missing. They want to talk about travel, and when they travel, they would go into meetings and sleep. And when Barbados turned on the microphone and the Democratic Party people would take coffee breaks, Mr. President. I'm sure the Deputy President can attest when she was in New York as well, after the aftermath of the cleanup we had to do diplomatically. And after time, you had the engagement of our Prime Minister, you had the engagement of our Foreign Minister, Senator Walker, and the contributions that we made. People started to realize, but you guys sound a lot different to the people who used to be coming at these places when they did come for the last 10 years. Sure. This is a real but sad reality. So Barbados, therefore, has not just a brand, it has a global moral authority which we must preserve. We are not a large state in terms of physical geography, of course, outside of the ocean, but Barbados has a large moral authority. And our young people must now understand that the educational system can allow for you to pass through and to walk in the footsteps of those who came before you in that regard. But more to the education and substantively, Mr. President. We must ensure that transformation takes place across the system. And why do I say that? One of the first things I did since coming here some 3 weeks now, I met with every single member of the ministry proper, which of course serves as the regulator for education in the country. I went from office to office, introducing myself. But in addition to what I did, I held a town hall in the car park of the ministry on a Wednesday morning. Why? If we're going to take our team into new heights and new frontiers that they've never gone before, we must ensure that everybody is part of the journey and understand the journey and their role in it and how they can own it. And I want to say publicly that I commit myself not for that just to be a one-off exercise, but for it to be an ongoing exercise where we constantly engage with our people. Second of all, within my first few days, I also met with every single principal in this country in the public education system. Every single one, both at the primary level and at the secondary level in separate meetings, of course. Now, at the primary level, of course, it allowed for you to get a sense of not just only share your vision and share the ministry's vision of the continuation of the transformation, but equally to hear and understand the opportunities that they would like to see, the issues that they have, and then how does the ministry work with them hand in hand in building out that ecosystem that we are all marching forth towards. Thirdly, Mr. President, I have been able to meet with 3 of the 5 unions that represent our teachers in our country as well. Because why? They are the ones, of course, who, from an industrial point of view, industrial relations point of view, meet and represent our teachers. The point is clear, and let the message go forth, that Minister Chad Blackman is open for dialogue. He's open to ensuring that all stakeholders have access to my office. Why? I am here to serve you. I'm here to serve the people, because all of us in the educational ecosystem now have to chart forth a new territory, and therefore it will require all hands on deck. But equally, transformation must start from home. And oftentimes, Mr. President, we focus on the teachers, we focus on the students, we focus on the PTAs. But we have to also focus on the homes. And I want to say to the parents, over the coming weeks, I'll be having a series of dialogue with you. Of course, it's not possible to meet every parent in this space, but I'm going to be having a series of dialogue through videos and different means that can outline not only where we're going, but to share with them how we can get there, and for them to also send in information to the ministry, to me as the minister and my team, that allows for us to hear their views and to see how we can incorporate all of this going forward. Because why transformation? Mr. President, when you look at the tallest building in the world, it could not have been done unless all were on the same page. The contractor, the mason, the tiler, the electrician, the person handling the bobcat, the crane. Everyone has to be in unison, working hand in hand going forward. Now, part of it also is meeting with the students. For a long time, of course, we've had a situation where we had an adult-centric type education. What do I mean by that? Where you have the heads of the schools and the ministry, of course, setting policy, which is part of its remit, and the students being a small part of that machinery. But part of Barbados going forward, and it comes back to what I said, has to be that our students are engaged at the earliest possible stage of dialogue, of being able to negotiate, of being able to be exposed to the rudiments of the educational system. And I want to take this opportunity also to commend my dear colleague, leader of government business, who as recent as Saturday held the finals of the Model UN, which is a fantastic program rolled out by the Rotary of Barbados. But why is it important? Because at that early age, it allows for them to be exposed to the rudiments of international diplomacy, helps with the confidence buildings, it helps them to understand the geopolitics of the world, negotiations, you get into your small teams, and oftentimes they have to hold positions that they themselves in their own personal lives or realities may not do, but you then prepare them for the future. And the truth is, our comparative advantage as a nation is leadership. This ecosystem called our education system must be able to churn out, and yes, I use the word deliberately, churn out and mass manufacture leaders, people who are able to go anywhere in the world and say, I am from Barbados, but I'm humble, but I can be your leader. And not by saying so, but people calling for you to be their leader. Whether it's in a sports club, an international organization, it doesn't matter. And that is also part of the beauty of those on this side in the Labour Party. Humility in leadership. And I would give a speech at another time, Mr. President, on that. And I'm sure the Democratic Labour Party would do well to listen. But I go forward. When you talk about the ecosystem of education, you spoke about the students, we have to talk about the foundation. The students serve as the cornerstone. But the teachers, Mr. President, serve, and I say this unapologetically, as the foundation. And I want to take this opportunity as the new minister, as I said to them already, but I'm saying it again. I want to commend the teachers, every single teacher in our system in this country, for the sterling work that they've done, not just now, post-independence, straight up to 2025. And in recent vintage, in 2020, 21, 22, in the advent and aftermath of COVID, they were the ones who were, like many other sectors of course, but they were the ones, Mr. President, on the front line of the external shock we now know as COVID. They put their health on the front line. They put their families on the front line. They put their finances on the front line. Because why? Many people were affected in different ways. And we owe an eternal debt to our country's teachers. I want to thank them. And it is why I've also said, and I've said to the team in the ministry, that for the first time in the history of Barbados, at least to my knowledge, let me put it like that, Mr. President, sir, I've committed to ensuring that our teachers in our country can have their due and recognition, Similar to how those who are called to the bar have their due and recognition, those who are in the medical profession, in their white-collar ceremonies, the teachers in Barbados must now have a national awards, Mr. President, from the pre-primary straight up to secondary, where they can be honored for what they do. The different categories, of course, will be worked out, and everybody recognized in some way or fashion. Because why? Without them, we have no educational system. But equally, part of it also, and part of the transformation, is for our teachers, of course, to be retrained and retooled, because why? The world in which they operate in constantly changes rapidly. And therefore, of course, they would have gone through the Erdiston training and many other different trainings that we would have had, but even that through continued professional development, which has already started even before I came, now has to be in continuation and ramped up, so that our teachers in our system, Mr. President and colleagues, are constantly on the cutting edge. Our teachers must be encouraged to do research and development. They must be encouraged to challenge even some of the intellectual schools of thought that they study as well. Because let's not fool ourselves, Mr. President. It must not be that only pedagogy and curriculum development and all the best models of teaching in the world our teachers have to import. Certainly God has blessed our teachers and those in the educational system to come up with ideas that can now lend to also how do we teach, so that we can also export the ideas of our teaching system around the world. And Mr. President, I'm sure you would recall, not too long ago I gave a lecture, the Matthew Farley lecture, which spoke to what I call the Farleyan views, similar to how Senator Reid quoted and referenced Keynesian economics and different types of bodies of thought. We in Barbados have to also take our best minds in education and teaching and be able to export to the world based on a settled pieces, bits of settled positions that can work and have been proven for us to do and go forward. And this is where the transformation has to take place. The same way how we've been fantastic and dominated in cricket around the world and in different endeavors, education now has to be, not should be or could be, education now has to be part of Barbados' DNA and comparative advantage going forward. Now, so where are we with the transformation? Of course, there's been a lot of training going on, training with principals, training at the levels of senior management and teachers. And there's a focus a lot now on what we call project-based learning, PBL. And why so? For a long time, we've operated in a system that has placed significant premium on examination. And we all know from time to time that even as adults now, if you have to take an exam, even if it's to do a driving test, there's a natural set of nerves and jitteriness, and it causes you sometimes on not a too good of a day. What ordinarily would be a success for you may not be so. But it does not take away from the God-given ability and experience that you've been able to garner over time, that you have the expertise in one way or the other. So, and therefore, from a very early age, we're now revamping the system to be able to have almost a parallel approach. Because of course there will still be exams in many respects, but the project-based learning allows for us as a country to prepare our people to do a number of things. Not just to excel, but to build competencies with respect to being able to work with their peers, pulling together a plan, coming together and helping each other to understand where you need to go. And you're learning as you go along, you're learning on the spot, and you're building upon layers and layers and layers of different methodologies as you go forward. And therefore, the project-based learning method is now in full pursuit as part of the transformation. And therefore, as a result, as I said, our principals, who of course lead our schools, our teachers are now being trained and further trained so as to now re-engineer how they deliver the teaching to our schools. And Erdiston Teacher and Training College, of course, in partnership with the Columbia University, has started to train over 100 principals in our system, Mr. President. And therefore, they've been exposed to modern approaches to education. This is the kind of transformation that this government, since coming into office in 2018, notwithstanding an IMF program, has been able to do, Mr. President. Because why? The role of government is to lead and to deliver, notwithstanding the circumstances before you. And this transformation is taking place in a perspective that allows for us to do so and to move forward in a comprehensive way. We also have the Open MS system upgrade, which of course captures data, and data is key. Why am I saying this? For a long time, policymakers throughout the world, and in this part of the region no different, have made decisions not just on other key sectors, but also education in the absence of data. And part of the process is that this government has committed to, is that we're going to ensure that we make the best decisions in new modes of education, new technologies in education, pedagogy, curriculum, subject matter, based on the data. And of course, buttressed by the data analytics, which allows for us to do forecasting on so many different areas that we can go forward. And certainly, the Ministry of Innovation, which Minister Reid leads, is going to play a significant role in this process as well as we build this out. But equally, when you look at revision of modern pedagogy, the truth is, Mr. President, every one of us, and also children, every one of us learn differently. And therefore, our system now has to cater for everyone's ability to learn. So we start on that premise. There may be exceptions where there's exceptional difficulties for an individual. But we start on the premise, going forward, that everyone learns differently. Everyone has the capability to learn and to do well. And therefore, our educational system now has to adapt to be able to teach them in ways that they can get it done. Because what may be easy for you via method A might be extremely difficult for me via method B, and vice versa. But it doesn't take away from our ability to do incredibly well. And therefore, that is why the project-based learning is so key. But I want to go further and getting now into the psychology of it and the minds, Mr. President. One of the things that I've said to the team in the ministry since I've gone there is that for a long time we've had the arts as a module or subject, and broadly, sometimes on the sidelines of the education process. And I've said, similar to how they do in Europe and other parts around the world, I've instructed the team in the ministry to pull together a team working with the National Cultural Foundation, where our students are exposed to music, but in a non-traditional way. And what do I mean? As you come into school, from the pre-primary, primary, secondary, or before your class, you should be exposed to what I call a Bajan playlist of music, composed by our best artists, our new upcoming musicians, but in Bajan spooge and Bajan jazz. Music that is soothing. So we're not talking about the high beats per minute genres like the bashment music. No. There's a place for that. What I'm talking about is, as I said, a fusion of Bajan jazz and Bajan spooge with messages of affirmation. Very calming. What it does, it allows for the school environment before classes start to be calm and soothing. It helps teachers to soothe and calm. It helps students to soothe and calm. But what it also does is to incorporate our national treasure, our music, our musical identity into our national consciousness and DNA at an early age. So therefore, our students become exposed to our genre. For a long time I've said spooge has to become the same way that reggae and pop and Afrobeats and Amapiano has become. But we can only do so if it now becomes part of the daily reality. And therefore, in the deconstruction of the educational model of all, the new model has to now look and reflect who we are on a day-to-day basis. So therefore, you're not just exposed to spooge when you go to a concert at the Jackie Opel Amphitheatre or in the NIFCA, but you're exposed to it on a daily basis from the time you're a young person. And second of all, I've also asked the ministry to work with the schools so that within a few weeks and months, every classroom in this country, and I repeat, Mr. President, every classroom in this country at the front of the class, from pre-primary to secondary, must have 3 words in which the children must be able to sit and see, and also that teachers should repeat before every class. 3 simple words. Nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible. So that if you're 2, 3, 4 years old, or you're 16, 17, you're constantly from that age to 17, or 15, 16, 17, according to when you leave the school system, you're constantly telling Barbadian people, nothing is impossible. You're shaping a consciousness, you're shaping a confidence, and a belief that they can do anything, of course, within the law, that their mind can conceive. Again, we're trying to prepare our citizens for the future of the world. We're trying to prepare our citizens to ensure that nothing can stop them from being world-class and confidence, grounded in humility and Bajan love and care. And therefore, you will see that rolled out around the country shortly, Mr. President, sir. I now come then to the element of exposure. A very key, important cog in this exercise of transformation. As I've said many times before, Mr. President, I, like many Barbadians, have come from humble origins, though rich parents, but parents who nonetheless place high premium on humility and the role of education in transforming your own life and those around you. And over time, I've been exposed to a number of things at a very early and young age, which has allowed for me to do many things in life. I started as parish ambassador, Christ Church, youth ambassador for CARICOM, national president of the National Youth Council, now called BYDC. Actually, Senator Monroe Knight, she was also one of my predecessors as president in that youth organization. I traveled to the Commonwealth, CARICOM, etc. Why am I saying this? That allowed me to be the person I am today in 2025. But equally, that is not the reality of every young Barbadian, Mr. President. But equally, it should be. Because why? If we can expose our people, our young people, from being able to be globally exposed from an early stage, of course, with the right parameters and guardrails to ensure their safety, we will create a generation, or 2, or 3, or 4, that again can compete anywhere in the world. And therefore, over the coming months, I'm going to be working with our team and other stakeholders in the country, private sector as well, as part of the model of transformation and part of the model of the education system in Barbados. I want to have a situation where, Mr. President, those between the ages of 15 and 17 for a 1 month or 2 month period can go to different metropoles around the world, whether that be Jakarta, Nairobi, Riyadh, Lima, it doesn't matter, once we figure out the details of it, and allow them to not go and shop, but to go and understand how the countries and the cities they're in, they work, studying the infrastructure, issues on climate, health, sport, punctuality. And therefore you come back and you Bajanize those experiences into the system in Barbados. Can you imagine, Mr. President, that happening over a 10-year period? And every young person in this country being exposed to that? You create a new class of Bajans, and class not in the sense of social strata, but you create a world-class Bajan who is exposed at an early age and understands the rudiment of the world. And to be exposed to different things, business, sport, health, and before they leave our shores, what will happen is that they spend at least 1 year understanding civics, so that they're rooted in Barbados and the tenets of our country. So not just, of course, our parliamentary system, but equally a lot of non-class-based activities going around the country, understanding how Barbados works. And therefore, when they leave our shores, they leave already with a sense of Barbadian confidence, understanding who we are, and therefore how you can also represent your country. And you're starting then a culture of new ambassadors at such an early stage as well. I then also want to move on to infrastructure. And let me say, this transformation process for me, Mr. President, is a very exciting one. Because what are we doing? All of us in here are being part of a process that is creating a new generation. And there's a saying, if you want to predict the future, you must do what? Create it. You must create it, and this is what we're doing. We are creating the future that we want. Now, part of the process as well has to be the physical plant across the system of our schools. Mr. President, I am sure if you want to take a bit of relaxation, you want to be inspired, you want to be rejuvenated, I'm sure you're going to ensure that you go to a facility that's fit for purpose, and part of it is going to be the aesthetics of that facility, whether it be a hotel or wherever. Similarly, the learning process and exercise of learning and education in Barbados has to be of similar vein and vintage. And therefore, the school's beautification program is a key part of the ongoing exercise of transformation. So under component one, and there are a number of components, you have the infrastructural upgrade. And in phase one, Mr. President, you see the redesign of the classroom layout, very important, which also has specialist rooms, which allows for different areas of specialization for persons to now hunker down in subgroups and to be able to focus in that regard. Modern upgrades to the bathroom facilities as well. Let's face it, our school plants have children that are going in and out constantly, our teachers the same, and we have to ensure that continually the facilities can be robust enough for the wear and tear that naturally takes place as well. So that is an ongoing exercise as well. Improved signages. Within and outside the school compound, persons must know that this is a school zone. And we mustn't only cater to persons who may know a particular area or live in a particular part of Barbados. Those who come to our shores, they hire cars and they drive. So when you're driving into a school zone, one of the things that we're going to be doing, working with the ministry with responsibility for transport, is to ensure that all schools across the country over a phased approach has a set of parameters that everyone has to engage with and adhere to. And that's why, in short order, I'll be taking to Cabinet the Barbados School and Safety and Security Policy, Mr. President, which outlines in a very comprehensive way school and safety, not just within the school, but the school plant and the surroundings. This is a key component. But also the beautification of the environment is key. So communities as well have a role to play, but our plants must also have a high sense of beautification, vegetation, in our plants, in the literal sense and physical sense as part of the exercise going forward. Also the installation, Mr. President, of water and energy smart systems has to be part and parcel of the process. Let's face it, we live in the tropics and it's very hot, and we have to also ensure that our teachers, our students, our auxiliary staff have at their disposal, Mr. President, water that they can have to take. But this also must be done in partnership with a number of stakeholders, and I'm going to use this opportunity to call on all of the different civic organizations, community groups, faith-based organizations, to work hand in hand with the ministry, and we're going to outline a protocol that allows for all of those stakeholders who want to engage with the schools to build out the community infrastructure aspect of it and the beautification, so that we can now move hand in hand as we go forward in developing our schools. Now, part of the transformation certainly and is curriculum development. 10 minutes. Wow. For a long time, our curriculum has been heavily focused on Europe and European values, North American values. But equally, the Barbadian and Caribbean values have to now be incorporated further into it. I knew more at age 15 about King Leopold than I knew about the fact that Barbadian produced 3 presidents who were Liberian. There's simple things like that that we have to change. So we're not closing off Barbadians from our worldview, but equally it has to be deeper incorporation as well of who we are as a people. When we look therefore at the resilience going forward, this year's exercise allows for us to build out our schools in a way that we are part of not just treating to the physical plant, but we are in a serious climate crisis. And our physical infrastructure must now reflect facilities that also can protect our people, of course, with the help of God, should we have a natural disaster that can serve for multiple purposes as well. And you're going to be therefore seeing a further building out, Mr. President, of these as well. But what are some of the new initiatives and programs of the ministry? The ministry, of course, is working to digitize our textbooks across the system. And this is a groundbreaking and transformative exercise because it brings our children into the 21st century as well. IT and technology, in my view, shouldn't just be taught as a standalone, but everything that we do should really incorporate the use of digital processes, thus allowing our people to use it on a day-to-day basis. So therefore, as a pilot project, we'll be launching the rollout of that textbook digital process in the first years of our secondary schools of this year, with access to the textbooks on a digital basis. And the ministry also is working that it will be rolled out further for all for September of 2026. Equally, the ministry is also in the process of identifying 22 master teachers so as to provide support for the teachers in our system. And additionally, we are now on the verge of ensuring that in our special education system, that those who come into face with it have the necessary tools at their disposal. So, over the last 2 years, we've had 3 schools included under that aspect. For example, Bailey's Primary, Milton Litch, St. Christopher Primary, and also the plan is to roll out more as we go on as well, Mr. President. Equally of great import is the testing and screening in our schools, both focused on the vision as well as the hearing of our children. Now this, of course, would have been piloted in September of 2023, and we've had some 2,390 from secondary schools, and the screenings will continue, working also with the Ministry of Health and Wellness, and on the hearing side of the screening, continuing also with the support of the Rotary Club, of which we want to give great gratitude and thanks. Of course, focused on Infants B and girls at Class 4. I'm sure Senator Cummins is exceedingly happy and proud. Mr. President, I couldn't go without also touching on the fact that very shortly we're going to be focused on what we call Oceana, the Oceana Innovative Hub, which will, of course, be located in Bay Street. And many of you who may traverse the Bay Street area would have already started to see construction there. But simply put, it really ought to serve as the nexus between the exploration on the issues of climate and the ocean. And how do we get our country to build out and to understand the rudiments of that as well. Mr. President, sir, in the interest of time, I couldn't take my seat without bringing reference to what some people call the elephant in the room. The Barbados Secondary school entrance exam, commonly known as the common entrance. And let me start by saying that this very emotive part of the discussion ought to be held with dispassionate views, a clear head, and a clear vision. And therefore, this government has set out on a course to ensure that notwithstanding this year in September 2020, May 6, 2025, we'll have, of course, the common entrance in its current configuration, where some 2,981 students are registered to take the exam. But I commit to the public to walking with you to ensure that we can now transition into a new mode going from primary to secondary. And believe you me, the country will be able to have a clear and well-settled position coming from the government on where we are going as well. But I also want to use this occasion to signal a level of shock and horror when, having listened to the leader of the opposition staunchly defending the common entrance and calling for it not to be abolished, Mr. President. We live in a world where, Mr. President, notwithstanding that we are in a republic and that we have as our head of state our own national, and therefore those in the legal profession, if you rise to the highest realms of the profession, you're no longer, or you shouldn't rather, be called either a Queen's Counsel or a King's Counsel. Some people still revere to that instead of being a senior counsel. And they wrap themselves in the garb of Britain and Europe. Because why? For them, it legitimizes their social strata. And therefore, for somebody or an honourable member of another place to call for the common entrance not to be abolished, and I want to quote Mr. President, the leader of the opposition, he quote, "The child who failed the 11 plus was always failing." I repeat, the leader of the opposition of this country said the child who failed the 11 plus was always failing. Mr. President, I want to know if the leader of the opposition shares those views to his members who he also has selected as part of his 15, his initial 15. Because I'm sure there are members on that side, and I heard of the voice notes being circulated about the displeasure that they've expressed. How can you be saying this? And a lot of us went to the newer secondary schools, Mr. President. But now I understand why Senator Walters also indicated that he was not going to walk this Wall Street behind an opposition leader that can share that view. Deny it. And there's a massive division in the Democratic Labour Party as a result of it. Mr. President, I wish I could play the voice note in Parliament here for you, but not today, at another time. But those in the Democratic Labour Party have expressed deep displeasure to the leader of the opposition for insulting them.
And even in here, there's division.
Of course, there's massive division in here. You have a situation where, Mr. President, the new senator on the Democratic Labour Party is now the leader of opposition business, and Senator Walters is very upset, but I understand why he would feel so.
Good person, but very upset.
Good person, but very, very upset. And never, of course, they never sit in here together. Mr. President, I invite the public to come in the Senate and visit and see for themselves. So you have to understand, Mr. President, and to those watching, ask yourself, why is that happening? He has cloaked himself in Britannia, notwithstanding, yes, he went to Harrison College, I understand. Walters, he went to QC.
He went to QC.
But Mr. President, there are those in the bosoms of the Democratic Labour Party who have taken deep offence to the leader of the opposition, saying the child who failed 11 plus was always failing. Have you ever seen such folly, Mr. President? It goes to the heart of who they are. Deep inequalities run deep in the vein of that party. And that is why they had no qualms of disengaging the 11 plus, the University of West Indies fees for our people when they were in office. But I am fully aware, Mr. President, that my time has now come to an end. But let me say to the country, we are on the verge of transforming not just the educational system, not just the health system, not just the global financial system. We are on the verge of transforming a nation. And therefore, this educational transformation process is the cog for which we are going to launch forward, not just for the next 5, but 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And I would encourage all Barbadians to rally around this exercise called educational transformation. And I give you my commitment publicly that I am your chief servant in this regard, working for you in the future for all generations of Barbadians to come. I thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Senator Blackman. Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I beg to move the suspension of this sitting of the House until tomorrow morning, Wednesday, March 18th at 10 a.m.
The question is that the sitting be suspended until 10 a.m. tomorrow, Wednesday, March 19th at 10 a.m. For those honourable senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This sit is therefore suspended until tomorrow, Wednesday, March 19th at 10 a.m. sharp.